Hi, this is Randall here in Texas.
And I'm Matt, here in Michigan. Today, Randall and I are doing our 10th call-up episode. And today we're going to be comparing two Clone Wars animated series. Now, we recently reviewed Tartakovsky's Clone Wars series for May the 4th, so we decided to see how it compares to George Lucas and Dave Filoni's The Clone Wars animated series.
Man, 10 call-up episodes? That's like one more episode than there is in the entire Skywalker trilogy.
Maybe we make this one the 10th in the Skywalker trilogy.
Yes.
In the saga, whatever, Skywalker saga.
Well, I'll tell you what. This is an interesting look because I think that I'm very, I don't want to say anti, but like I there are things about the Clone Wars that I definitely don't like. Specifically because they trample on canon, and I don't really care how well it came out in the end, so much as my first gut reaction to them was, oh man, that's just silly because that doesn't make any sense in the context of, what's established. Contrary to that, Clone Wars, I felt, actually did a better job of caring about canon, but, maybe doesn't go to the full lengths of being this big, blossoming, awesome thing that the Clone Wars ended up being. What's your first gut reaction on that one?
Me, I can't really go in and say that I really like one more than the other. I mean, I like both of these for like different things or whatever. And I would agree with you. I think I had some similar first reactions to the Clone Wars, the longer series. And I think both of them have some good points, and I think a lot of what makes them different is because of that format. Because Clone Wars is more of like a short kind of like, I wouldn't say filler, but it's to help us like bridge the gap between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith. So it has those like shorter stories where I think the Clone Wars, you definitely need to invest more into it. It's a longer series, and yeah, it does take longer for those payoffs to actually happen. So the first like reaction to some of the beginning stuff of the Clone Wars, I don't think does, really hit. I think it does take that full view to really appreciate it. But I think after you go through it, I think it is worth it. And I think it does also enhance the characters that we have in the movies.
Yeah, it's in some aspects it definitely does, but in other aspects, I'm just gonna say it. Why Ahsoka Tano? I love Ahsoka Tano's character. I love the way that she grew. I love what it ended up being. Everything that the Clone Wars did with her character was great. And the way that it ends up, going into Star Wars Rebels and then even now into The Mandalorian, that's good. It's very good storytelling. But at the same time, I just like some of the stuff that the Clone Wars does with Anakin's character, making him a master. And I'm like, well, yeah, but then if you watch this and then you watch episode 3, you're like, oh, you're going to sit on this council, but you won't be granted master. I'm like, did you not just watch 7 seasons of the Clone Wars?
Yeah, the whole thing of the master, it's kind of weird. It's kind of like they're going like, well, he's not like a Jedi master where like all the other masters call him master, but he's a master to an apprentice kind of thing.
Hello, Master.
But yeah, it's kind of weird that that is such a big deal in the movie.
You are on this council, but we do not grant you the rank of master. What?
And then you go and you have, Ahsoka calling him master. But it is because of they're taking that route, I think of it as kind of like, an apprentice calling him a master, as opposed to others who have mastered the light side of the Force, calling him another master.
I guess in that sense, fine. But it's definitely pulling hairs. Come on. And I don't have many hairs left to pull except for in the back, I guess. But her character to me is so weird in the context of what was established, because you got to remember when the Clone Wars launched, it didn't launch with a series. It launched with a movie, and not a very well received movie at that. And you have, very young Padawan Ahsoka just being teamed up with not Obi-Wan, which kind of would have made sense, I guess, except for Anakin was already his Padawan. Her whole character, notwithstanding where she ends up, was very confusing and very not necessary. And in Clone Wars, it's concentrating on this relationship specifically between Obi-Wan and Anakin. And I'm like, that's the way I think we should have went, because that really would have helped bolster them for the eventual like betrayal that we have.
You were my brother, Anakin. I loved you.
And you don't get to see that on the screen very often in The Clone Wars, the long form series, even as much as you do in that like 2.5 hours of Clone Wars, the miniseries.
I do think The Clone Wars does touch a bit on Anakin and Obi-Wan, but it's kind of in a different way, I guess, of it. Because in Clone Wars, we see a lot of, Anakin building stuff. Like, we have elements that we see, Anakin coming closer to becoming Darth Vader. One is the fight with Assange Ventress, and the other one is when Anakin is, helping out that tribe, and he gets that, Darth Vader image there kind of thing. So that's an idea kind of planted in that, and then I think The Clone Wars takes that and tries to tell a similar story of that in like a different way. And the episode I'm talking about, or I should say story arc I'm talking about, is with the brother and the sister in The Clone Wars. And that one, we do have Anakin get that vision too, in just a different way of him becoming Darth Vader, and that changes his character. Of course, later his mind gets wiped and basically loses that vision, but it also is kind of an enhancement kind of for this thing. It's also a lesson for Obi-Wan, where it's kind of like, hey, the future isn't necessarily set in stone, but this could happen to Anakin kind of thing. Whereas in Clone Wars, it was kind of like, Anakin kind of kept his vision to himself a little bit. And then, Obi-Wan, from what his thing of what he thinks Anakin probably saw in that image or whatever, he's kind of like, this is what you can learn from whatever it is that you saw, because it was your Jedi test. It's different for each character, or each Jedi, I should say.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's just, if I round out my complaints about Ahsoka, is that she was unnecessary to tell that story. And that's not me saying, hey, I wish that character never existed. That's just me saying, if I look at it in the context of like canon and what this story could have been between these two, regardless of which one of the like paths you like better, I wish it had concentrated more specifically on those two characters, Obi-Wan and Anakin, instead of putting Ahsoka in there in the middle of it. I want to stress that I don't dislike Ahsoka the character. I dislike the way they took that storyline, and just shoved her in there. Like, that's weird. But you're right. You're 100% right. The way that it tells these many different story threads, The Clone Wars takes a lot of the storylines, even the little storylines, and expands on them for everything. Not just Obi-Wan, not just Anakin.
Yep. And, mention Ahsoka a little bit. I think her inclusion probably is in there, is to have that younger person in it. I think the reason they didn't go with necessarily like Anakin being the driving force, probably Filoni and George is like, well, Anakin at this point is a little bit older than what we want our audience to really connect with this. So let's insert this new, younger character and try to have, a younger audience established to this. And I think I kind of see that a little bit too with like the Bad Batch too. Randall and I are watching the Bad Batch. We'll get to Bad Batch series later, but I think that's too, we get a new character in the Bad Batch too, which is a little bit younger. So that's why I think they have Ahsoka Tano. And, as we've mentioned in our previous reviews before, the other movies, like stuff that came out before we got Ahsoka Tano, still feel off, having no mention of Ahsoka Tano.
I'd like to expand a little bit, not necessarily on characters, but like on this thread that we touched on, where storylines that have been told in Star Wars Clone Wars, the mini series episodes, were like expanded on greatly. These side characters, Mace Windu and General Grievous, these characters actually get a lot more time. Yoda gets a lot more time, obviously, just through the benefit of The Clone Wars being a much more long-form series. And you get to delve into them having conversations, getting to learn more about the Force, getting to learn more about Padawans putting their lightsabers together, kyber crystals. The Clone Wars does a lot of canon building that you could never have done in such a short little chasm of 2 hours of little itty bitty episodes.
But yeah, at the same time too, Clone Wars I think has some elements in it too that we don't get in the longer series of the Clone Wars. One of the things that you were talking about too is kind of like how, Anakin, should still be, like Obi-Wan's apprentice and stuff. In the Clone Wars miniseries, we actually get where he gets, the rank of like Jedi Knight kind of thing. And I could be wrong, but I don't think we really get that in the longer The Clone Wars. We're kind of thrown past that point where Anakin is no longer, the Attack of the Clones Anakin. We're jumping right to, hey, closer to Revenge of the Sith Anakin, even though The Clone Wars takes place over a longer period of time too. And one of the things I'll say is kind of like looking at the two shows, comparing with Clone Wars, the miniseries, we have like a more of a linear story arc. We have kind of like a beginning, and as we pass on, it's like later. Where especially like the Clone Wars, how it started, the episodes weren't even in order and stuff. Like we would get stuff in like season 2 and season 3 that happened before the episodes that we got in like season 1. So it's kind of a little bit different to figure out like, hey, what happened when. How does this relate? Hey, we're referencing stuff that happened like 10, 15 episodes and stuff now. And this supposedly took place before that. So that's something that's a little bit different between the two series.
Man, I remember watching through the Clone Wars the first time like, what? Wait, what? This doesn't make sense. And I think I even probably texted you to ask, like, what is... He's like, oh yeah, it's out of order. Why is it out of order?
It's funny, I think Dave Filoni said one time, he's like, you know what, I think George just likes prequels is what it is. George just likes prequels. But really, a lot of it is, like we were talking about before, George liking kind of like those old, clips, like you'd go in and you'd see, just random episodes, kind of here and there kind of thing. I think it's supposed to be kind of like a throwback to the old things that, that he watched and stuff growing up too, why they're just different out of order.
Even those had a chronological storyline. If I talk about other things about the Clone Wars that bother me, of course, it's almost always going to be canon breaking. So just get it out of your mind. If Randall's complaining, it's probably because it breaks canon in some way.
This is the funny thing too, is because Clone Wars isn't canon, and it's the Clone Wars that is canon.
It is canon. And again, I want to stress this greatly. It's not that I don't like what they did, it's that I don't like that they did it at all. Darth Maul. The man's fucking dead, but he's not dead. But he should be dead. And the Clone Wars goes out of its way to tell this marvelous, really good storyline with Darth Maul. It's some of the like really best storylines that happen in the Clone Wars, and I'm like, I can't stop thinking about how irritated I am that they needed to do this instead of using like Asajj Ventress or somebody else, or even Savage, because he would have been fine. You didn't need Darth Maul to come back from the dead.
And that's one thing too. It's something that we keep doing in Star Wars and stuff too. I mean, even
Boba Fett.
Exactly. Like, and I think that was a big part of it. It's part of it is the fuel of it. Of Star Wars fans kind of like, you know what? We had this character that we really liked, even though what it appeared on screen was just so short. We've built this character into much more than what we've seen on screen, and we wanted to dive into that more than just kind of more like prequel stuff, like stuff that happened before he died kind of thing. So it'd be interesting to see what the conversations were between, the creators of the Clone Wars and George basically like saying, yeah, let's bring Darth Maul back. And like you said too, I don't think that was part of George Lucas's original vision to have Darth Maul play such a large part, post Phantom Menace that he does now. And he's not just really good in this too, he also plays a pretty pivotal role in Star Wars Rebels too. So some of my favorite Star Wars parts is with Maul, even though, yeah, I mean, shouldn't Maul still be dead after the Phantom Menace?
To be fair, if I'm busy complaining about Star Wars things, the biggest mistake was George killing him off at all. You just, you took this really cool villain who could have had a really interesting storyline, obviously based on the Clone Wars storyline, could have had a really awesome storyline in the prequels, and it's like, we'll just kill him in the first episode. And it's like, what? No, why? So that's the biggest mistake right there. Not necessarily what the Clone Wars ended up doing, but why kill off this, what could have been a really good foil for Obi-Wan?
Yeah, and I think that gets part of too how, comparing these two series and then like this series to Star Wars in general, you only have like so much time, like I said, in like these movies to tell different things. And unless you put them in like books or comic books and stuff, you can do a lot more with a series. You can have these longer things. So George is probably thinking in the movies like, we're going to have this cool bad guy, but kill him off because we need to show that there's this bigger baddie. And, the same thing with, like, Count Dooku. I mean, I think Dooku dies pretty quickly at the beginning of Revenge of the Sith, where it's kind of like, no, we're moving on. So I think it's kind of just showing kind of like that relationship of, like, Sith Master and, Sith, Lord kind of thing, where it's kind of just like, the Sith Master really looks at his apprentices as kind of disposable in that way kind of thing. And I think we feel that a bit in both of these Clone Wars series with Assange's Ventress kind of thing. And that's one thing, a difference I think I like about the Clone Wars, that we actually get to dive deeper into Assange Ventress, because in Clone Wars, the Ventress is just in there for, just like 2 scenes basically, where we get her like training thing, and then she has their fight with Anakin with, spoilers, it appears that she dies, Anakin kills her, and we mentioned that where Sidious is just like, she's just merely an instrument, to help eradicate the Jedi, lead to my greater plan. But in the Clone Wars, she plays a bigger role, and we get a little bit with Dooku, like Dooku's almost training her to help him, maybe defeat the Emperor at some time, and that's why she has to be taken out by Dooku, because, Sidious basically says, she is too powerful, to prove your worth to me, your loyalty to me, Dooku, you need to eliminate her.
The 2 characters that were introduced in Gendy's Clone Wars, Asajj Ventress and General Grievous, one of them's done better in the Clone Wars, and one of them I think is not done better in the Clone Wars. Asajj is done a lot better in the Clone Wars, like you had just mentioned. General Grievous' storyline, though, I absolutely love just how badass Grievous is in Clone Wars. He goes toe-to-toe with not just like a Jedi, like 4 or 5 Jedi. Ki-Adi-Mundi is like struggling with him, even with a group of other Jedi, and he's a master sitting on the council, Amazingly cool introduction for a character. He's strong, he's powerful. They go through the trouble, like I mentioned in our previous review, of explaining his like breathing issues with Mace Windu's confrontation with him. That's all good. In the Clone Wars, I don't fear Count Dooku. God dang it, I did it again. God darn it! I don't fear Count Dooku either, but that's different. In the Clone Wars, I don't necessarily fear General Grievous. Most of it, he just always has the cough, which I find annoying. I like that there's a reason for it, but most of the time it's just like, okay, he's not that terrifying, he's not that scary, he doesn't do very many evil things, and most of the generals on the Confederate side are just there for laughs, and they just end up running away.
Yeah, I think a lot of it too is like when these characters like were developed. I think in Clone Wars, the creators of it probably didn't know a whole lot about what Grievous was going to be in Revenge of the Sith. They just, probably got like a general outline where it's like, all right, well, he's this, mechanical, like cyborg, part, humanoid, but also like robot. He's supposed to be almost like a precursor to Darth Vader a little bit. And, he's this big general that leads the droid armies, and he's a big foe for the Jedi. So I think they were taking those little notes and like, hey, let's make this really awesome character. And then the movie, he isn't quite that much of a character. So then when we come up to the final season of Clone Wars, we gotta kind of bridge that a little bit. Let's take this awesome character and let's explain why he's not quite so awesome in the movie. But now that we have the Clone Wars, you know, and all of Clone Wars is no longer canon and stuff, we can just kind of write that stuff off and rewrite the story. We kind of just write the character more like he is in the movie and not have to bridge this gap between this really awesome Grievous and this, you know, okay Grievous that, you know, Obi-Wan takes out by himself kind of thing. And yes, that part that you're talking about, how he just kind of like battles and then runs away, that is like his character throughout the Clone Wars. We take that little element from like Revenge of the Sith where he battles Obi-Wan a bit and realizes that he doesn't have the upper hand, so he runs away. And that is his complete story pretty much in the Clone Wars. Battles a little bit. He's a, you know, a bit of a tactician or whatever with, you know, the droid army, and when stuff isn't going right, he's like running away, always on the run. I will say one thing I did like about Grievous, and that kind of goes with Asajj Ventress, the other character that we got introduced in Clone Wars, when we get the two of them when Grievous is actually attacking Dathomir and stuff, I think that was actually pretty good, and just showing how Grievous can be, you know, a badass or whatever in the Clone Wars, along with like a droid army. He actually is kind of an intimidating presence, I think, in that one storyline.
When you have bad guys fighting against bad guys, it's okay for the bad guy to be bad. But when he's fighting against good guys, the good guys always have to come up on the upper hand, Matt.
Yup.
Nope, I really did not. I genuinely don't like the way they handled General Grievous's character at all in the Clone Wars. I prefer the not canon version 100% of the time.
One thing I would say I think I like better about the Tartakovskys, as opposed to like, you know, Filoni and Lucas's Clone Wars, I think I like the art style better in Tartakovsky's. I think there's something about, you know, traditional animation stuff. Maybe it's because, you know, when I was younger and stuff, those are the type of cartoons and stuff that I watched. It was more like hand drawn and stuff, as opposed to now like computer generated like 3D modeling kind of thing. I think a lot of younger audiences have grown up with that and are more into that. But I kind of like more of the stylized, you know, hand-drawn stuff because we can go more over the top, I think. So there's something about watching cartoons that you can dispel your belief a little bit more, where it's kind of like, all right, I'm watching a cartoon. I know cartoons can do things that you wouldn't be able to do in the normal world kind of thing. So I think it's really good that we actually get to see, you know, like Mace Windu and stuff be, you know, more, you know, powerful, do more crazy things. And I think that's more acceptable using that style as opposed to doing more like 3D animation. Me personally, I think like 3D animation, you know, computer generated is trying to go more towards like movie and stuff. But I will say, I think the Clone Wars, the animation does get better as the series goes along. I think there's especially a big difference between like the Clone Wars movie that we started off with and how we end with like season 7.
Yeah, the animation style is good, but I don't want to put all of that animation means that we can be crazy with our characters just because it's animated. You can do that with CGI. You know, there's nothing stopping you from doing it. But I do, and I mentioned this in our Clone Wars, recap, where I thought the Jedi in this are so awesome. They're so OP. It's great, and you don't get that with the Clone Wars very much. It's just I wanted to see Anakin be amazingly awesome as a pilot, using his Jedi skills and everything, and I see that in Clone Wars, and I see Mace Windu be absolutely baller in Clone Wars. I don't get that feeling when I watch the Clone Wars. It's just, yeah, Anakin's he's a step above. He's a pretty good pilot. He's better than most. That's not enough for me. I need him like to be like what Obi-Wan says in Episode 4, the best star pilot in the galaxy. I don't get some of that feeling from Clone Wars, and I don't think you can just say, it's the animation style.
I think, like you said, his actual ability is shown a bit more in Clone Wars. In the Clone Wars, I think they're focusing more on like his relationships and stuff to try to explain a little bit better why this character would turn into like Darth Vader. There's one element I was talking about in Revenge of the Sith in one of our previous reviews, where basically I'm saying how we get that little incident where the clone starfighters are not doing all that well, and Anakin's basically like, hey, I'm gonna go help them out kind of thing, and Obi-Wan's kind of like, no, stay on the mission kind of thing. They'll do their job, you do yours kind of thing. And I think that makes a little bit more sense after watching The Clone Wars, because we actually get to see relationships between Jedi and the clones. In the movies, the only hint that we got of that was between Cody and Obi-Wan. And that, I think, was a big character, too, to show in that movie. It's not just a clone. He's got a name. His name is Cody. And I think the Clone Wars series does a good job looking into that. It's a big, I think, powerful storyline throughout, where it's kind of like, hey, they're clones, but they're not all the same. They have different personalities. They have different things that they do. They're actually individuals and not just a clone of an individual kind of thing. And in Clone Wars, we get a little bit of that. We get the specialized units, which I know you said before that's some of your favorite scenes, and mine too. Watch, that was some of my favorite scenes with the ARC troopers and stuff, where kind of shows like, hey, we can have clones specialize in different things. But I think the Clone Wars does a really good job of telling individual stories about individual clones.
Yeah, absolutely, it does. But it's a weird thing if you're looking at Clone Wars, like I said, where they're all specialized and they're, the ARC troopers are just awesome and everything, but they're still just kind of clones. They're kind of still treated as cannon fodder in a lot of that. In the Clone Wars, absolutely, you start seeing the groundwork for lots of them being different. In fact, they kind of they shrug off having their numbers. Like they're always, whenever they're on Camino or something, they'll be referred to as their tag number.
Or just numbers, 99. Just numbers.
But they don't want numbers. They all have names. All of them. Not just specialized units. Every clone basically starts being their own thing and having their own experiences and their own, personalities. And that is very, very well shown in the Clone Wars. But along with just how the troopers are treated, is you see a growing bond between the troopers and the Jedis in the Clone Wars that you never ever see in the shorts for, Clone Wars themselves. This bond and the eventual, Order 66 betrayal is almost right up there with like the betrayal between Anakin and Obi-Wan. And that really, really works. If you've watched season 7 of The Clone Wars, which we have a review on, like how that unfolds is absolutely devastating. And it is not something that in the short form, 2.5 hours that you could have really established, unless that was really all you were trying to establish.
Yes, for sure. It's definitely worth going through watching. We get the payoffs. And that, like you said, the Order 66, that's one of the biggest payoffs and stuff too. What we have with like Ahsoka and Rex, and what they go through and everything in it. That is something that if you just watch, season 7, you're like, all right, I'm just going to watch this and then watch Revenge of the Sith. It helps a little bit, and I think it does enhance, but you really don't get that full payoff without you watching like the whole series and really seeing what these characters have gone throughout. And like you said, I mean, that's part of the thing. You can't really have that in, like a short 2-hour thing as much. You don't have that big of a payoff, which you can with a 7-season show.
But speaking of that, one of the things that I think both series do very well, I can't say that one does it better than the other, honestly, is showing the scope of the war. Clone Wars, even though it's short, it shows planets, all sorts of different planets, and the damage and just how devastating a galactic war can be. And The Clone Wars does the same thing. It does it a little different because it's so long and drawn out. You get to see the war get to the nitty gritty, the ground troops. You get to see a lot with the clones. You get to see a lot with like the different planets that they're on, especially Mandalore. That becomes a theme a lot in the Clone Wars, but just the way the war is tearing the galaxy apart and just how widespread it is and how it is really all encompassing. There's really no escaping it. Both series do it well. They just do it different.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, taking one scene that we see in Clone Wars and then how it's expanded in the Clone Wars, the battle on Mon Calamari. Like we get a little hint that, there's two, like main races or whatever on Mon Calamari, and there's kind of a split. Like one is being more like a separatist, and the other one is being more, with the Republic. And we get that expanded on a lot more in the Clone Wars. We actually get explained a lot more why they have different views. And I think that's really good too about the Clone Wars being able to expand on that. We get to see a little bit more of why separatists are separatists, like what their different views are. And that's one of the things too, we take kind of a different approach with Padme. Padme helps us see those different things because she has friends that are separatists, and she's trying to understand why they're separating from the Republic, and how she can basically work with them to try to bring them either back into the fold or bring an end to the war kind of thing. And that's something we can explore in that short 2 hour Clone Wars kind of thing that I'm glad that we're able to see a bit more of in the Clone Wars.
One of the characters that we haven't even touched on was Padme, so good. Thank you for bringing that up. I straight up mentioned it in Clone Wars review that she's just awful in almost every single scene. It's just not very well done. But in the Clone Wars, you get to see her being a politician, being a diplomat. She also gets put in some, like situations where she has to, use her, her wits and her skills to escape, etc., and some, standard issue DID stuff. Her character in the Clone Wars is way, way, way better fleshed out. And you can kind of see, a little bit why is the way she is in episode 3. You would never get that from watching Clone Wars.
Yeah, I mean, a part of it is because, Tartakovsky's Clone Wars is more action-based. Everything that we get in the story elements we get is more of an action-based, like, characters doing things, like, we see how they interact with different situations. So, like, Padme's stuff, either the only dialogue she really has is with, like, Anakin or with, like, Yoda, which, you said before, you weren't really big on that part really at all. So it's kind of like, hey, we have to have her do some action stuff. Whereas in the Clone Wars, it's more dialogue based. And that's how we get to see more of Padme's character, as you mentioned, in different ways.
Imagine if they had taken the Clone Wars Padme and just expanded it into episode 3 to the point where she actually is almost a sympathizer with the Confederacy. Imagine if they had taken that route with her character and actually given Anakin's character a reason. Like, oh, you're siding with the separatists, like, because she can sympathize with them, because she can understand them, and with everything that's happening with the Palpatine and everything, she starts seeing, oh my god, the Republic is a control freak, or like how things are going is bad. Like, then she gets on this path of being an actual separatist, and then like Anakin has a reason to actually kill his wife instead of just Obi-Wan standing on a ramp.
See, I think we get little hints of, like Padme being a little bit more sympathetic to the separatists in Revenge of the Sith.
What if the democracy we thought we were serving no longer exists, and the Republic has become the very evil we've been fighting to destroy?
I don't believe that. And you're sounding like a separatist.
I think that kind of goes with, like, I think George is a pretty good storyteller. He has good ideas. I just don't know, like, in, like, the prequels and stuff, that George really, like, executed a lot of his ideas in, like, shorter form movies. And I think maybe George would, do better with, like, shows and something like the Clone Wars. Like, hey, I have these really good ideas and stuff, but they're kind of more long form and need to be explained a different way. And so I think it was good now that we have, like, Filoni that has, been that pupil and stuff under George to basically really get to know what George is trying to look for, like what are the main story beats and stuff. And then Filoni can kind of like execute it into like series, and maybe hopefully, we get our Filoni movies and stuff too. So yeah, bring it on, Filoni. Come on, Dave.
I don't know if he's gonna make movies, honestly, but like everything that Dave Filoni has touched has basically made Star Wars better for the most part. Because if I'm honest, I know that Ahsoka Tano was George Lucas's idea. It was like a mix between George and Dave Filoni's idea, and they wanted to tell a different story, and then they're like, you know what? Let's just throw her into Clone Wars. Like, that's well established. You can go look up the interviews, basically. But for the most part, everything Dave Filoni has done has been better and made the prequels better. The Clone Wars is not necessarily... I don't think the Clone Wars is his magnum opus. I think he's still working on that. But he is definitely a huge, very powerful like tool for using the Clone Wars to set up all these other characters, all these other expansions, setting up Star Wars Rebels, setting up everything. These things that the Clone Wars did underneath Dave Filoni's tutelage, and direction could not have been done in the same way using the shorts that we have with, just like you said, filling that gap between episode 2 and 3.
One thing I do think that both of these series do a real good job. I think both of these series definitely enhance the movies, the Skywalker Saga movies, even in short form and long form. The Clone Wars might be able to do a little bit better because it is longer, but I think each on their own definitely do enhance it. I mean, granted, Star Wars Clone Wars is no longer canon, the Clone Wars, but still, I still think it's enjoyable, and I still think, you can enjoy both of them, even knowing I think, there's enough of a blueprint or, a setup in Clone Wars that led to the Clone Wars. So you still know that, like, hey, George and stuff still had these ideas about Star Wars that, they just had to do in short form. And then with the Clone Wars, we were able to expand it. And that's one thing, too, I said, too, that I love about Clone Wars. Without Clone Wars as kind of like a proof of concept showing like, hey, this can work. People like this kind of thing. We probably don't get the Clone Wars.
And then maybe we don't get the Mandalorian, and you don't get some of the cool stuff that happens between Ahsoka Tano and Darth Vader and Rebels, etc., Bad Batch, all of it. Yes. Without that proof of concept, without everyone basically saying, wow, that's cool, we should delve into that deeper, you don't get Star Wars that you have today.
And we enjoy that Star Wars and stuff, or at least I do. I enjoy some of the new stuff that
some
we're
of
getting
it,
from Star Wars.
Some of it. Rogue One, good. Han Solo,
it's okay.
I know you like Solo more than me, but like, unnecessary.
I think Solo is one of those things where I had like zero expectations going in. I'm like, oh, this is gonna be bad. And then when it was okay, I'm like, you know what? This is pretty good.
Yes, well, when your expectations are zero, don't watch Redneck Zombies.
Randall and I watched it, so you don't have to.
So you don't have to. Yes. Oh, man. Well, this has been a fantastic look back at these two different series that are very different from each other, but covering the same information. Now, Matt and I are taking Memorial Day weekend off, so the next time you see us will be next Thursday, not next Monday.
But don't worry, the next video, we got something special, especially for the Unapologetic Geek, so be sure to check that out for sure. Also, Randall and I didn't mention this at the beginning, but be sure to like this video and subscribe. Ring the bell so you get notified about our other videos. Other than, Memorial Day weekend, our videos do come, as Randall says, every Monday and Thursday.
We have other call-up episodes. Make sure to check those out. We also do reviews on other TV shows, movies, and flashback reviews. Check out the YouTube page if you want to see more. For now, I'm Randall here in Texas. I will see everyone next time.
I'm Matt here in Michigan. Have a good day, everybody. Next time on No Market Media. Please consider checking out some of our other videos.